Okay, so picture this. A man is dragged out of a cave he's lived in his entire life, hauled up into the sunlight for the very first time, and the real world is so bright it literally blinds him. And here's the twist that should make the hair on your arms stand up. When he goes back down to free his friends, the ones still chained to the wall watching shadows, they don't thank him. They want to kill him. That's where we're starting, and trust me, it only gets weirder from here. This is the kind of channel where we take the most unsettling ideas humans have ever cooked up and pull them apart on the couch like it's nothing. If that's your vibe, hit subscribe. We drop this stuff every single week. Ring the bell if you're feeling fancy. Alright, let me explain that cave, because it's basically the blueprint for everything coming after. The year is around 380 before the Common Era, and you're sitting in Athens listening to a guy named Plato describe a scene. Imagine, he says, a group of people who have been chained inside a cave since birth. Not for a weekend, not for a few years, their entire lives. Their heads are locked in place, so they can only stare at one wall in front of them. They can't turn around, they can't look at each other. They can only see that one stone wall. Now behind them, there's a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, there's a walkway where people carry objects back and forth. Statues, animals, tools, all sorts of shapes. The fire throws the shadows of those objects onto the wall the prisoners are forced to look at. So all day, every day, these chained people watch shadows dance across the stone. And here's the thing, the only thing. To them, those shadows aren't shadows. They don't know there's a fire. They don't know there's a walkway. They don't even know they have backs. The shadows are reality, the whole of it. When a shadow of a book passes by, that flickering dark shape on the wall is what the word book means to them. They give the shadows names. They predict which shadow comes next. They probably hold competitions over who's best at guessing the order. They build an entire intellectual life around shapes that aren't even real. Now here's the crazy part. One prisoner gets freed. The chains come off, and he's forced to stand up and turn around for the first time. And it hurts. His neck aches. His eyes scream at the firelight. He's confused and disoriented. He sees the fire. He sees the actual objects being carried. And at first, his brain rejects it. He thinks the shadows he knew his whole life were more real than these strange, solid things in front of him. That's how deep the conditioning goes. Then he's dragged out of the cave entirely, up the rough slope into the open air, and the sun absolutely wrecks him. He can't see anything. He's in pain. He wants to crawl back into the dark, where things made sense. But slowly, his eyes adjust. First, he can only look at shadows on the ground outside, then reflections in water, then actual objects, trees, rocks, animals. And finally, eventually, he can look up at the sun itself, the thing that makes all of it visible. And in that moment, he gets it. He understands that everything he ever believed back in the cave was a flickering copy of a copy. He's seen the real world now, and there's no unseeing it. So what does he do? Obviously, he goes back down to tell his friends. He loves these people. They spent their whole lives chained together. He wants to free them too. And this is where Plato turns the knife. When he climbs back down into the dark, his eyes, now used to the sun, can't handle the gloom of the cave anymore. He stumbles around, half blind. He tries to describe the sun, the sky, the colors, the real shapes of things. And to the chained prisoners, he sounds like a raving lunatic. Worse, since his eyes can't read the shadows anymore, he's terrible at their shadow games now. He loses every contest. So they conclude that going up out of the cave doesn't enlighten you, it ruins you. It makes you stupid and blind and useless. And they decide that if anyone ever tries to drag them up that slope, they'll kill the person who tries. They'd rather murder you than leave their shadows. And that's why this thing has haunted people for 2,500 years. Because Plato isn't really talking about a cave. He's talking about you. He's saying the world you walk around in, the things you're absolutely certain are real, might just be shadows on a wall. And the people who try to show you something deeper usually get mocked or punished for it. The most uncomfortable question he leaves you with isn't whether you're in the cave. It's whether, if someone freed you, you'd thank them or reach for a rock. Now, speaking of things you're certain are real, let me hand you a ship. A very old, very famous ship. The ship belonged to a hero named Theseus, and after his voyages, the people of Athens kept it in the harbor as a monument. Year after year, they maintained it, and ships rot. Wooden planks decay, they crack, they get waterlogged. So whenever a plank went bad, the Athenians pulled it out and replaced it with a fresh new plank. Totally reasonable. That's just maintenance. That's how you keep anything old alive. But here's where your brain starts to itch. Over the decades, plank by plank, every single original piece of wood gets replaced. The mast, the hull, the deck, the oars, all of it. Eventually, not one fragment of the original ship remains. Every board is new. So I'll ask you the simple question that's not simple at all. Is it still the ship of Theseus? You probably want to say yes, right? It's been continuous the whole time. It never stopped being the ship. You just swap parts one at a time, like changing the tires on a car. Of course, it's the same ship. Okay, but now let me mess with you. Suppose some clever guy had been collecting every old plank they threw away. Every rotten board, every cracked oar. He kept them all in a warehouse. And one day he takes all the original pieces, the real original wood that Theseus actually sailed on, and he reassembles them into a ship. Same planks, same arrangement, same everything, the literal original material. Now you've got two ships. One in the harbor made entirely of new wood that's been called the ship of Theseus this whole time. And one in the warehouse made entirely of the original wood. Which one is the real ship of Theseus? And now you're stuck. Because both answers feel right and both feel wrong. The harbor ship has the continuous history. It never stopped being the ship. But the warehouse ship has all the original atoms, the actual wood the hero touched. You can't have it both ways. And if you try to pick, you realize you don't actually know what makes something the same thing over time. Is it the material? Then the harbor ship is a fake. Is it the continuity and the form? Then the warehouse ship is just a replica. There's no clean answer. Philosophers have been arm wrestling over this for centuries, and nobody's pinned it. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you, because this isn't just about boats. Your body does exactly the same thing. The cells in your body are constantly dying and being replaced. The lining of your stomach gets swapped out in days. Your skin sheds and regrows. Your bones, your blood, vast amounts of the physical material that makes up your body gets replaced over the years. The you reading this is, at the atomic level, made of largely different stuff than the you of a decade ago. You are the ship of Theseus. Plank by plank, cell by cell, you've been replaced. And yet you call yourself the same person. You wake up every morning assuming the person who went to sleep is the same one who woke up. But what's actually carrying that sameness? It's not the material, that's mostly gone. So what is it? That's the trapdoor under the whole thing. You feel continuous, but you can't point to the thing that makes you you. Now, hold on to that feeling of not knowing what you really are, because we're about to test what kind of person you are, and you're not going to like your own answer. Picture this. You're standing next to a railway track. There's a lever in your hand, one of those big metal switches that changes which way a train goes. Down the track, a runaway trolley is barreling toward 5 people who are tied to the rails. They can't move. The trolley is going to hit them and kill all 5. But you've got the lever. If you pull it, the trolley diverts onto a sidetrack. The only problem is, there's one person tied to that sidetrack. So you've got a choice. Do nothing and 5 people die. Or pull the lever and 1 person dies instead. Most people, when you put them in this scenario, say they'd pull the lever. 5 lives for 1. The math is obvious. 1 death is a tragedy, but 5 is worse, and you'd be a monster to just stand there and let 5 people die when you could have saved them. Easy. You pull the lever, you save the 5, you feel terrible about the 1, but you did the utilitarian thing. The greatest good for the greatest number. Yeah, you'd pull it. Most people agree with you. Now here's where it flips on you. Same situation, basically. The trolley is again heading toward 5 people tied to the track. But this time, there's no lever, no sidetrack. Instead, you're standing on a footbridge over the rails, looking down. And next to you on the bridge is a very large man. A big, heavy guy. And you realize, with horror, that if you pushed him off the bridge, his body is big enough to stop the trolley. He'd die, but his bulk would block the trolley and save the 5 people down the track. Same math exactly. 1 life to save 5. So, do you push him? And now almost everybody recoils. No, absolutely not. You're not going to grab a man and shove him off a bridge to his death with your own 2 hands. That feels like murder. It feels evil. But wait, hold on, the numbers are identical. 1 dies, 5 live. In the lever case, you were fine with it. You called it the obvious moral choice. So why does pushing the man feel monstrous when pulling the lever felt righteous? The outcome is the same. 1 person dies so that 5 can live. Let me explain what's actually happening in your head, because this is the genius of the experiment. There's something about using a person as a physical object, as a tool, grabbing them and using their body as a trolley stopper, that your moral instincts violently reject, even though a cold calculation says it's identical to the lever. With the lever, the death of the 1 person feels like a side effect of saving the 5. With the push, the death of the man is the means. You're directly using him as a thing. And your gut treats those 2 situations as completely different categories of action, even though the spreadsheet says they're the same. And that's the whole unsettling point. You like to think you have one consistent moral system, that you're a logical person who makes decisions based on principles. But the trolley problem proves you don't. You've got at least 2 different moral machines running inside you, a cold calculator that counts lives, and a hot instinct that screams about using people as objects, and they flatly contradict each other. Which one is right? When the 2 disagree, which one should you trust? There's no settled answer. Philosophers, psychologists, and now even people designing self-driving cars are wrestling with this exact split because a machine that has to choose who to hit needs an answer, and we humans can't even agree on one. Turns out, you don't know your own morality half as well as you thought. Okay, so we've cracked open what's real and what's right. Now, let me come after the one thing you'd swear nobody can take from you: your own mind. The year is around 1640, and a French philosopher named Descartes is sitting alone, and he decides to do something reckless. He decides to doubt everything. Not casually, not lazily, but absolutely. He wants to find out if there's anything at all he can know for certain, so he's going to throw out every single belief that could possibly be wrong, even a little, and see what's left standing at the bottom. So he starts with the senses. Can you trust your eyes, your ears, your skin? Well, no, not really. Your senses fool you all the time. A straight stick looks bent in water. Things in the distance look small. You've had dreams that felt completely real while you were in them. You were totally convinced, right up until you woke up. So how do you know you're not dreaming right now? You can't prove it. Maybe everything you're seeing and feeling at this moment is a dream. So out goes the entire physical world. You can't be certain it's real. But Descartes doesn't stop there. He goes nuclear. He imagines what he calls an evil demon, a being of supreme power and cunning whose entire purpose is to deceive him. This demon could be feeding fake sensations directly into his mind. The sky, the ground, his own body, all of it could be a fabrication piped in by this demon. There might be no external world at all, just the demon and the lies. And here's the truly terrifying escalation, because most people think, okay, fine, my senses could be faked, but at least math is true. At least 2 + 3 = 5 no matter what. Descartes says, no, even that. The demon could be manipulating your reasoning itself, making you feel certain that 2 + 3 is 5 when it actually isn't. The demon could be tampering with your logic, so even the things that seem self-evidently true could be implanted deceptions. Now you've got nothing. The world's gone, your body's gone, even mathematics and logic are suspect. Everything you've ever believed could be a lie, pumped into your mind by a malicious genius. And then, from the very bottom of that pit, Descartes finds the one thing that survives. He's sitting there doubting absolutely everything, and he realizes something. Wait, I'm doubting. I'm thinking. And in order to be deceived, in order to be tricked by this demon, there has to be a me, a thinking thing, for the demon to trick. Even if every single thought in my head is false, the fact that I'm having thoughts at all proves that I exist as something that thinks. The demon can lie about everything except this. The moment I think, I prove I am. And that's the famous line. I think, therefore I am. It's the one rock at the bottom of the ocean of doubt that he can stand on. He couldn't be certain of anything else, but he could be certain that there was a thinker doing the doubting. Now here's the crazy part, the part people forget. Even that gets attacked. Later philosophers came along and said, "Hold on, Descartes, you've assumed too much. You've proven that thinking is happening, sure, but you slipped in an extra claim, that there's an I, a unified self, a thing that does the thinking." Maybe there's just thought, just experience happening, without a solid little self behind it owning it. You said, "I think, therefore I am," but all you really earned was thinking is occurring. The self might be just one more thing you assumed. So even the last rock at the bottom of the ocean turns out to be a bit slippery. And that's where Descartes leaves you, on a thread of certainty so thin you can barely see it, with the unsettling realization that almost everything you call knowledge is built on a foundation you can't actually verify. Alright, so your reality might be shadows, your self might be a swapped-out ship, your morals contradict each other, and you can't even be sure the world outside your head exists. Let me ask you something even heavier. What if you had to do all of it again? Forever? This one comes from Nietzsche, and he framed it like a curse whispered to you in your loneliest moment. Imagine a demon, again with the demons, philosophers love these, slips into your room one night and says this life, the one you're living right now, you will have to live again. And not a better version, not a do-over where you fix your mistakes, the exact same life. Every single detail, in the same order. Every joy, yes, but also every pain, every embarrassment, every heartbreak, every regret, every boring Tuesday, the same dust on the same windowsill, the same thoughts in the same sequence. All of it, infinitely many times, forever. And then again, and again. With nothing new, nothing different, ever. Now Nietzsche's question isn't really, is this true? He's not making a claim about cosmology. The question is, how would you react? When the demon told you that, would you collapse? Would you gnash your teeth and curse the demon and scream that this is the most horrible thing you've ever heard? An eternity trapped, reliving every awful moment of your life with no escape? Or, and this is the knife edge, is there a version of you that could hear that and say yes? Yes again. I would live this exact life infinitely, because it was that worth living. Nietzsche called this the eternal recurrence, and he used it as a test, basically the heaviest weight you could put on your choices. Because think about what it does. If you knew you'd have to relive every single thing you do for all eternity, how would you live right now? Would you keep doing the things you do out of bitterness, out of resentment, out of habit? The wasted hours, the grudges, the cowardice? Or would you start trying to build a life where each moment is something you could bear to repeat forever? Something you'd actually want to repeat? It's a way of asking, are you really living your life, or are you just enduring it, waiting for it to be over? And here's why it stings. Most of us, if we're honest, hear that demon's curse and flinch. We don't want to do it again. There's too much we'd want to change, too much we regret, too much we did just to get through. And Nietzsche's point lands right there. That flinch is information. It's telling you that you're not living the life you actually want. You're living one you're hoping to escape. The challenge he throws down is to live in such a way that you'd say yes to the demon. Not lying, not pretending, but genuinely meaning it. To love your fate so completely, every twist of it, that infinite repetition sounds like a gift instead of a sentence. That's a brutal standard, and it tells you exactly where you stand with your own life, whether you scream or whether you say yes. Now, speaking of staring eternity in the face and deciding what to do about it, there's another guy who looked at a meaningless universe and came to a stranger conclusion. Let me explain. His name was Camus, and he started from a place that sounds completely bleak. He said, look at the universe honestly. It is silent. It doesn't care about you. There's no cosmic plan, no built-in meaning, no answer written in the stars to the question, why am I here? You, a creature that desperately craves meaning, that needs your life to matter, are thrown into a universe that offers you absolutely nothing back. It just stares at you, blank and indifferent. Camus called this collision the absurd. The absurd isn't the universe being meaningless on its own, and it isn't you wanting meaning on your own. It's the clash between the two, your hunger for meaning slamming into a world that refuses to provide any. And Camus said, this is the one truly serious philosophical problem. If life has no inherent meaning, the obvious question becomes, well, why keep going at all? Why not just check out? That's how dark the starting point is. He looks straight at it and says, the real question is whether a meaningless life is worth living. And then he does something you would never expect. He says yes, and he points to a guy pushing a rock. You know the myth. Sisyphus was a figure from Greek mythology who angered the gods, and they gave him the perfect punishment. He has to roll an enormous boulder up a mountain, and every time he gets it near the top, just as he's about to finish, the boulder rolls back down to the bottom. So he trudges back down and starts again. And he does this forever, pushing the rock up, watching it roll down, walking back down, pushing it up again. Eternal, pointless, exhausting labor with no purpose and no end. The gods figured there's no punishment worse than futile, hopeless work repeated forever. And Camus zeroes in on one specific moment. Not the pushing, the walk back down. That pause when Sisyphus turns and trudges back down the mountain to start over. That moment when he's fully conscious of his fate, when he knows exactly how pointless this is and that it will never end. That, Camus says, is the moment that matters. Because in that moment, Sisyphus is completely aware of his absurd condition, and he has a choice about how to hold it. He can be crushed by it, or he can own it. And here's the line that is echoed for decades. Camus says we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happy. The man doing the most pointless task in all of mythology, and Camus insists we picture him content. The reasoning is this. The struggle itself, the pushing of the rock, the sheer act of living in the face of meaninglessness is enough to fill a human heart. Sisyphus doesn't need the boulder to reach the top. He doesn't need the task to have a point. He owns his rock. It's his. The mountain belongs to him. The struggle belongs to him. And by accepting his fate fully, with open eyes, refusing to lie to himself and refusing to despair, he becomes free. He becomes more powerful than his punishment. The gods wanted him broken, and instead he's up there, conscious, defiant, and somehow at peace. And that's the gut punch Camus leaves you with. Because you're Sisyphus. You wake up, you do your tasks, you go to sleep, you wake up and do them again. And one day it all ends, and the universe won't have noticed. Camus isn't telling you to find some hidden meaning to make it okay. He's telling you there isn't one, and that you can live anyway, fully, fiercely, even joyfully, precisely because you've stopped waiting for the universe to hand you a reason. The rock is yours. Push it like you mean it. Okay, now we've been assuming this whole time that there's a real world out there and a real you experiencing it. Let me take a sledgehammer to that, because there's a serious argument made by a serious philosopher with serious math that says you're probably not real at all. The philosopher is Nick Bostrom, and the argument is called the simulation argument. And the scary thing about it is that it's not just stoner talk, it's actually structured logic. Here's how it goes. Think about where technology is heading. Computers get more powerful every year. Now imagine a civilization, maybe ours in a few centuries, maybe an alien one, that becomes incredibly advanced. So advanced that it can run simulations of entire worlds, complete with conscious beings inside them, minds that feel and think and experience just like you do right now. If consciousness is just a product of information processing, and a sufficiently advanced computer can do that processing, then a simulated mind would be just as conscious as a real one. It wouldn't know it was simulated. It would feel exactly like you feel right now, reading this, certain that it's real. Now here's the move. If a civilization ever reaches that level, how many simulations would they run? Probably not one. They'd run thousands, millions, billions. They'd simulate their own history over and over, run experiments, make entire universes for fun, for research, for entertainment. So for every one real, base-level world, there could be billions of simulated ones, each packed with conscious minds who all think they're real. And now do the counting, because this is where it gets you. If there's one real world and a billion simulated worlds, and every one of those worlds is full of conscious beings who feel completely real, then the vast, overwhelming majority of all conscious experiences are simulated. Real minds would be a tiny, tiny fraction of all minds. So if you pick a random conscious being, like, say, you, the odds are crushingly against it being one of the rare, real ones. Statistically, you're almost certainly a simulation. Not metaphorically, mathematically. The numbers say you're probably software. And Bostrom sharpens this into a tight little trap, 3 possibilities, and he says at least one of them has to be true. Either one, civilizations basically always go extinct before they get advanced enough to run these simulations, so nobody ever builds them. Or 2, advanced civilizations could build them but for some reason choose not to. They all decide it's unethical or boring or pointless, every single one of them, with no exceptions. Or 3, we are almost certainly living in a simulation right now. That's it. One of those 3 has to be the case. And when you really sit with it, the first 2 are kind of hard to swallow. Why would every civilization die before getting there? Why would every single advanced civilization, across all of reality, decide never to run a single simulation? Those require remarkably strong, universal claims, which leaves option 3 looking uncomfortably likely. And here's the part that really gets under your skin. There's no experiment you can run to check. If you're in a well-built simulation, everything would look exactly as real as it does now. The physics would be consistent, your memories would feel genuine, the coffee would taste like coffee. There's no glitch you could find, no edge of the map you could walk to. The simulation, if it exists, is seamless by design. So you're left holding an argument that's logically tight, points toward you probably being a simulated mind, and offers you absolutely no way to confirm or deny it. You just have to live with the question humming in the back of your skull. Turns out the most rigorous argument might be the one that quietly tells you you're not real. Now, speaking of arguments that quietly break things, let me tell you about a barber who broke mathematics. An entire barber, one small village, and he took down the foundations of an entire field. This one comes from Bertrand Russell, and it starts as a cute little riddle. Imagine a village with one barber, and this barber follows one simple rule. He shaves all and only those men in the village who do not shave themselves. So if you shave your own face, the barber leaves you alone. But if you don't shave yourself, the barber shaves you. Simple, right? Everyone in the village is covered. Every man either shaves himself or gets shaved by the barber. Clean rule. Now here's the question that detonates it. Who shaves the barber? Let's think it through. Does the barber shave himself? Suppose he does. Suppose the barber shaves himself. But the rule says the barber only shaves men who do not shave themselves. So if the barber shaves himself, then he's shaving a man who shaves himself, which breaks the rule. So he can't shave himself. Okay, fine. So suppose the barber does not shave himself. But the rule says the barber shaves all men who don't shave themselves. So if the barber doesn't shave himself, then he's a man who doesn't shave himself, which means the barber has to shave him. So he does shave himself. But we just said he doesn't. You're spinning in a loop. If he shaves himself, he doesn't. And if he doesn't, he does. There is no possible answer. The barber both shaves and doesn't shave himself, which is impossible. Now, you might shrug and say, okay, cute logic puzzle. So the barber doesn't exist. Who cares? But here's the crazy part. Russell wasn't actually talking about barbers. The barber is just a friendly disguise for a much deeper problem he found, one that struck right at the heart of mathematics itself. At the time, mathematicians were trying to build all of mathematics on a rock-solid foundation using set theory, the idea of collections of things, sets. And one of the assumptions was that for any property you can describe, there's a set of all things with that property. Sounds harmless. So Russell asked, consider the set of all sets that do not contain themselves. Some sets contain themselves, some don't. Fine. Now does this set, the set of all sets that don't contain themselves, contain itself? And it's the barber all over again. If it does contain itself, then by its own definition it shouldn't, because it only contains sets that don't contain themselves. But if it doesn't contain itself, then it qualifies for membership and it should contain itself. The exact same vicious loop, but now it's not about a village barber. It's about the basic building blocks people were using to construct all of mathematics. Russell's paradox showed that the foundation everyone was standing on had a crack running straight through it. You could derive a flat contradiction from the supposedly rock-solid rules, and in mathematics, A single contradiction is catastrophic, because once you can prove something both true and false, you can technically prove anything at all. The whole structure becomes worthless. This sent shockwaves through the world of logic and mathematics. People had been building these grand systems assuming they were perfectly consistent, and a guy with a story about a barber showed that the obvious, intuitive way of doing it produced a self-destructing contradiction. Mathematicians had to scramble and rebuild set theory from the ground up with careful new rules specifically designed to outlaw these self-swallowing sets. And it worked, sort of. They patched it. But the lesson stuck like a splinter. Even the most precise, careful, rigorous system humans had ever built, pure mathematics, the thing we hold up as the example of perfect certainty, had a place where it could turn around and bite its own tail. A barber in a tiny village exposed a crack in the floor of reason itself. Now, speaking of reason hitting a wall, let me tell you about a donkey that starved to death because it was too logical. Yes, a donkey. Stay with me, because it's pointing at something about your own free will. This one's called Buridan's ass, and ass here just means donkey. Settle down. Picture a donkey, and it's hungry. Genuinely hungry. It needs to eat. And in front of this donkey are two piles of hay. Now here's the catch, the crucial part. The two piles are absolutely identical. Same size, same quality, same smell, same distance from the donkey, exactly. There is no difference between them whatsoever. The donkey is standing precisely in the middle, equidistant from both, and both piles are equally appealing in every conceivable way. Now, if the donkey is a perfectly rational creature that only acts on reasons, watch what happens. It needs to pick a pile to walk to. But why would it pick the left pile? There's no reason to, because the right pile is exactly as good. And why would it pick the right pile? No reason, because the left pile is exactly as good. For every possible reason to go left, there's an identical reason to go right, perfectly canceling it out. Pure reason gives the donkey no grounds to prefer either one. And so, if it acts only on reason, it can't choose. It stands there, frozen, perfectly balanced between two equally good options, unable to break the tie. And it starves. To death. Standing right next to not one but two piles of food, the rational donkey dies because reason alone couldn't tell it which way to turn. Now obviously, a real donkey would just eat. A real donkey would twitch, get bored, randomly amble toward one pile, and chow down, no problem. And that's exactly the point. The thought experiment isn't about donkeys, it's about what's actually doing the deciding when reason runs out. Because the real donkey doesn't die, which means something other than pure reason is breaking the tie. So what is it? And this is where it splits into two fascinating answers. One possibility is randomness. Maybe when reasons are perfectly balanced, the universe, or your brain, just injects a little random noise, a coin flip, a twitch, some tiny arbitrary nudge that tips you one way. Which would mean that some of your choices aren't really reasoned at all, they're just noise breaking a deadlock. The other possibility is free will, a genuine capacity to just choose, to pick one option without any reason favoring it, an act of pure will that reason alone could never produce. And here's the twist that flips the whole thing. We usually think of the ability to choose without a determining reason as a flaw, like, shouldn't a good decision always have a reason behind it? But Buridan's ass suggests the opposite. The ability to break a perfectly balanced tie, to just choose when reason is silent, isn't a bug, it's a necessity. Without it, you'd be the donkey, frozen forever between two equal piles, starving in the name of logic. The very thing that looks irrational, choosing without a sufficient reason, might be exactly what keeps you alive and functioning. Turns out pure reason, all by itself, can't even get a donkey across a room. And now, for the grand finale, the one that puts a ceiling on certainty itself. Because after all these experiments poking holes in reality and morality and the self, you might be clinging to the hope that at least somewhere, in pure logic, in pure mathematics, there's a place where everything is provable and certain and complete. Let me explain why even that hope has a hard limit. Mathematically proven, no escape. The man is Kurt Gödel, and what he did in the early 1930s is considered one of the most stunning intellectual achievements of all time, and also one of the most disturbing. Remember how, after Russell's barber broke set theory, mathematicians were busy rebuilding everything on careful, rigorous foundations? The dream at the time, championed by some of the greatest mathematical minds, was beautiful. They wanted to create a complete and consistent formal system for all of mathematics. Complete meaning every true mathematical statement could be proven within the system, and consistent meaning the system would never contradict itself, never prove something both true and false. The dream was a perfect machine of reason, where you could feed in any true statement and the machine would, in principle, be able to grind out a proof. Total certainty, a mathematics with no gaps and no contradictions. Gödel walked in and proved that dream is impossible. Forever. Not impossible with current techniques, not impossible until someone smarter comes along. Mathematically, provably, permanently impossible. Here's the shape of what he did, and it's gorgeous and terrifying at once. Gödel showed that in any formal system that's powerful enough to do basic arithmetic, ordinary numbers and addition and multiplication, you can construct a statement that essentially says of itself, this statement cannot be proven within this system. Let that sink in. He found a way, using pure mathematics, to build a sentence that refers to its own unprovability. And now look at the trap. If the system could prove that statement, then the statement would be false, because it says it can't be proven, but you just proved it, so the system would have proven a false statement, which means the system is inconsistent. It proves false things. But if the system is consistent, if it only proves true things, then it cannot prove that statement, which means the statement is true. It genuinely can't be proven, exactly like it says. So here you have it, a statement that is true, but unprovable within the system. A true thing that the system can see as true from the outside, but can never prove from the inside. This is Gödel's first incompleteness theorem, and it's devastating to the dream. It means any consistent system rich enough to handle arithmetic is incomplete. There will always be true statements it cannot prove. You can add the unprovable statement as a new axiom, sure, just bolt it on. But then Gödel's method lets you build a new, unprovable but true statement in the bigger system. You can never catch up. There's always another truth just out of reach of proof. The gaps never close. And then he drove a second nail in, his second incompleteness theorem, which is somehow even worse. He proved that no such system can prove its own consistency. That is, mathematics cannot, from within itself, prove that it's free of contradictions. You can't use the system to guarantee the system won't break. If a system could prove its own consistency, that would actually be a sign that it's inconsistent. So the very thing the mathematicians wanted most, a guarantee that their perfect machine would never contradict itself, is precisely the thing the machine can never provide about itself. You're asked to trust the foundation, but the foundation can't certify itself. To verify it, you'd need to stand on some bigger system, and then that bigger system can't certify itself either, and on, forever. Now here's why this should keep you up at night, even if you've never written a proof in your life. We tend to think of mathematics and logic as the ultimate bedrock, the one place where, if you're careful enough and rigorous enough, you can reach absolute, total, gapless certainty. Gödel proved there's a ceiling on that. Built into the very nature of any sufficiently powerful logical system is a boundary it cannot cross. There are truths that cannot be proven, and consistency that cannot be self-verified. Certainty itself, the thing we chase, the thing we assume is out there if we just work hard enough, has a hard limit baked into the structure of reason. Not because we're not smart enough yet, because it's mathematically, provably impossible to do otherwise. And that's the thread running through every single one of these. The cave, where reality is shadows. The ship, where the self dissolves plank by plank. The trolley, where your morals contradict themselves. The demon, where even logic can be doubted. The eternal return, where your whole life gets weighed. Sisyphus, where meaning has to be invented against an indifferent universe. The simulation, where you might not be real. The barber, where the foundation of math cracks. The donkey, where pure reason freezes and dies. And Gödel, where certainty itself hits a wall it can never climb over. Every one of them takes something you assumed was solid ground, reality, identity, morality, knowledge, certainty, and shows you the trapdoor underneath. And the wildest part is that none of these are tricks or gimmicks. They're the honest endpoints of thinking really, really hard about things you take for granted every single day. Which just goes to show, the more carefully you look at the floor you're standing on, the more you start to wonder if there's a floor there at all. Now you might think we've covered the heavy hitters, the Big Ten that get all the attention. But philosophy has a whole basement full of these little brain bombs, and some of the nastiest ones never make it onto the highlight reel. So let me keep pulling them out, because every one of them is going to chip away at something else you thought was safe. And we're going to start with one that comes for the most personal thing you own, your identity. Not your body this time, the actual you, the continuous thread of being that you call yourself. Picture this. It's the future, and teleportation has been invented. It works perfectly. It's been used millions of times. Nobody's ever gotten hurt. Here's how it works. You step into a booth on Earth. The machine scans your body down to the last atom, recording the exact position and state of every single particle that makes you you. Then it destroys your body here, vaporizes it instantly and painlessly, and beams that information to a receiver on Mars. On Mars, the receiver uses local atoms to build a perfect copy of you, atom for atom, identical in every way. Same brain, same memories, same personality. Same little scar on your knee from when you were a kid. The copy steps out of the booth on Mars, looks around, and thinks, well, that worked. I'm on Mars now. Great. It remembers stepping into the booth on Earth. It feels like one continuous person who just traveled. So, easy question. Did you travel to Mars? Or did you die on Earth and a copy that just thinks it's you is now walking around on Mars? Most people use teleporters all the time in this scenario without thinking twice. Step in, get scanned, get destroyed, get rebuilt. No big deal, you've arrived. But pump the brakes. The you that stepped into the booth on Earth was destroyed, vaporized. That stream of consciousness ended. The thing on Mars is brand new, built fresh from Martian atoms, just carrying a copy of your memories. So is it you? Or is it a very convincing stranger who inherited your life and genuinely believes it's you? And here's where it gets nasty, the part that should make your stomach drop. Let me explain. Suppose one day the machine malfunctions. It scans you on Earth, beams the info to Mars, builds the copy on Mars perfectly, copy steps out, everything's fine on that end. But the malfunction means it fails to destroy your original body on Earth. So now you're still standing in the booth on Earth, completely alive, totally yourself, and there's also a perfect copy of you walking around on Mars, also completely convinced it's you. Two of you. Now which one is the real you? You'd obviously say, well, I'm the real one. I'm the one standing here on Earth. I never left. I have the continuous consciousness. The Mars copy is the imposter. But wait, if the machine had worked correctly, if it had destroyed your Earth body like it was supposed to, you would have happily called the Mars copy you. You'd have said, yes, that's me. I teleported, no problem. The only difference between the copy being you and the copy being a stranger is whether your Earth body happened to get destroyed. That's insane. Whether the Mars person is you or a totally separate being shouldn't depend on whether some other body, far away, got vaporized. Their existence is identical in both cases. So what makes them you in one scenario and not you in the other? The teleporter forces you to admit that you have no clear idea what makes you the same person across time and space. You think there's a definite fact about whether you survived. There might not be. There might just be more or less similar bunches of matter, and the feeling of being a continuous self might be a story your brain tells, not a deep truth about reality. Turns out, the one thing you are absolutely sure of, that you are you, is the thing you can least explain. Now, speaking of not being able to explain the thing right in front of you, let me lock you in a black and white room for your entire life and see what happens when you walk out. Because there's an experiment that's going to ask whether you can know what something is like without ever experiencing it. And it goes after the gap between knowledge and experience, which turns out to be a canyon. This one's called Mary's Room. Imagine a scientist named Mary, and Mary is brilliant, possibly the greatest scientist of color vision who has ever lived. There is nothing about the physics of light, the wavelengths, the way the eye works, the way photons hit the retina, the way the optic nerve fires, the way the brain processes visual signals that Mary does not know. She knows every single physical fact about color vision, every neuron, every chemical, every wavelength. She is the complete master of the science of seeing color. But here's the catch. Mary has lived her entire life inside a room that is completely black and white. She was born there and raised there. Everything in the room is black, white, or shades of gray. She studies the world through a black and white monitor. She's read every book, learned every fact, but always in grayscale. She has literally never seen a single color in her life. She knows everything about what happens in the brain when a person sees red, the exact wavelength, the exact neural firing pattern, all of it written down. But she has never, ever seen red herself. Now one day, Mary walks out of the room. For the first time in her life, she steps outside and she sees a red apple. Or a red rose, a clear red object. And here's the question that's been driving philosophers up the wall. Does Mary learn anything new? She already knew every physical fact about seeing red. She knew exactly what wavelength it is, exactly what her brain would do. So when she actually sees red for the first time, does she go, "Ah, yes, exactly as I expected. I already knew everything about this." Or does she go, oh, so that's what red looks like. I had no idea." And almost everyone's gut says the second one. Of course she learned something new. Of course there's a jolt, there it is, a quality to actually seeing red that no amount of book knowledge could have given her. And here's why that's a problem, a serious one. Because Mary already had all the physical facts, every single one. If she learns something new the moment she sees red, then there's something about the experience of red, the what it's likeness of it, that isn't captured by any physical fact. There's a kind of knowledge, the knowledge of what an experience feels like from the inside, that you cannot get from outside, no matter how complete your scientific description is. This is the hard problem of consciousness wearing a costume. Because it suggests that experience itself, the redness of red, the painfulness of pain, the taste of coffee, what philosophers call qualia, might not be reducible to physical facts at all. You could write down every physical detail of the universe, every particle and force and brain state, and you still might not have captured what it's like to be something, to experience anything. There'd be a fact left over, the experiential fact that the physical description completely misses. And that's a crack right down the middle of the scientific worldview, which assumes that, in principle, everything is physical and physically explainable. Mary's room whispers, maybe not. Maybe the most intimate thing you have, your own raw experience, is exactly the thing that science can describe from the outside and never quite capture from the inside. Turns out you can know everything about something and still not know the one thing that matters most. Now, hold on to that idea, that there might be something it's like to be a thing, because the next one takes that and runs it straight off a cliff. It asks whether you could ever know what it's like to be something genuinely different from you. And the answer it lands on is genuinely humbling. This comes from a philosopher named Thomas Nagel, and the question he asked is gloriously simple and impossible. What is it like to be a bat? Now, not what would it be like for you to be a bat. That's easy, and that's the trap. You imagine yourself with wings, hanging upside down in a cave, and you go, okay, kind of weird, probably cold. But that's not the question. The question is, what is it like for the bat to be the bat? From the inside of the bat's own experience. And here's why bats specifically. Because bats navigate the world through echolocation. They send out high-frequency sounds and read the echoes to build a picture of their surroundings, in total darkness, at high speed, catching insects mid-flight. This is a way of perceiving the world that is completely, fundamentally alien to anything you have ever experienced. You see with light. You have no idea, none, what it's like to perceive a three-dimensional world through bouncing sound. It's not like hearing exactly. It's not like seeing. It's a whole sense you simply do not have. And the bat's brain is built around it. The bat presumably has some inner experience, some what it's like, of flying through the dark, reading echoes off the walls and the bugs. Nagel's point is brutal and precise. You can study the bat's brain forever. You can map every neuron, understand the entire physics of echolocation, know exactly how the sound waves travel and how the bat's brain processes them. You can know every objective, third-person, physical fact about being a bat, and you will still have absolutely no idea what it is actually like to be one, from the inside. Because the bat's experience is subjective, it's tied to the bat's particular point of view, its particular kind of mind, and you can't get inside that point of view. You're stuck in your own. The best you can do is imagine yourself as a bat, which is useless, because you want to know about the bat's experience, not your imagined version of it. And here's why this is bigger than bats. It exposes something fundamental about consciousness. Subjective experience is tied to a point of view, and science, as we know it, is all about the objective, the view from nowhere, facts that anyone can verify from any perspective. But consciousness, what it's like to be something, is inherently a view from somewhere, from one specific inside. So there might be a whole category of facts about what experiences are like, that are real, that genuinely exist, but that can never be fully captured by objective science, because the moment you make them objective, you strip out the very thing that made them what they are, the point of view. And it doesn't even stop at bats. Think about this. You can never truly know what it's like to be another human being. You assume other people have experiences roughly like yours, but you've never been inside anyone else's head. You don't actually know what red looks like to them, what pain feels like to them, whether their inner world is anything like yours at all. You're locked inside one point of view, the only one you'll ever have, forever. Turns out the entire universe of other minds is a place you can describe but never visit. Okay, so now you're wondering whether anyone else even has an inner world like yours. Good. Let me make that so much worse. Because there's an experiment that suggests the things around you might be having experiences you'd never suspect, or that you yourself might be missing something you'd swear you have. This one's about a guy who reads Chinese without understanding a single word. It's called the Chinese Room, and it comes from a philosopher named John Searle, and he built it specifically to attack the idea that a computer could ever truly understand anything. Here's the setup. Imagine you're locked in a room. You don't speak a word of Chinese. You can't read it, you can't understand it, the characters look like meaningless squiggles to you. But in this room, you have a gigantic rulebook, written in a language you do understand, say English. And the rulebook is incredibly detailed. It tells you, when you receive a piece of paper with these particular Chinese squiggles on it, you write down these other Chinese squiggles in response and pass them back out. Now, outside the room, there are people who actually speak Chinese. They write questions in Chinese on slips of paper and pass them through a slot into your room. You take the slip. You don't understand a word of it, but you look up the squiggles in your massive rule book, follow the instructions precisely, copy out the squiggles it tells you to, and pass the response back out. And here's the thing. The rulebook is so good, so comprehensive, that the responses you produce are perfect, fluent, intelligent Chinese. The people outside are having what looks like a flowing, meaningful conversation. They're asking about your favorite food, your opinion on a poem, telling jokes, and getting back perfect, witty, appropriate answers. From the outside, it looks exactly like the room understands Chinese. It passes the test perfectly. The people outside are completely convinced they're talking to someone who understands them. But here's the gut punch. You, inside the room, do you understand a single word of Chinese? No, absolutely not. You're just shuffling symbols according to rules. You have no idea what any of the conversations mean. You don't know if you're discussing the weather or the meaning of life. You're manipulating squiggles based on their shapes, matching inputs to outputs, with zero comprehension of what any of it means. There's no understanding happening anywhere in that room, just symbol shuffling. And now, Searle springs the trap. He says, this is exactly what a computer does. A computer takes inputs, follows rules, produces outputs. It manipulates symbols, ones and zeros, according to its programming. It can produce perfect, intelligent-seeming responses. But following Searle's logic, there's no more genuine understanding in the computer than there is in you sitting in that room shuffling Chinese characters. The computer is the room. The program is the rule book. And just like you don't understand Chinese, the computer doesn't understand anything. It's syntax, the manipulation of symbols by their form, with no semantics, no actual meaning, no understanding behind it. So Searle's conclusion is that no matter how convincingly a machine behaves, no matter how perfectly it answers, you can't conclude it actually understands. It might just be a very elaborate Chinese room. And here's why this one is genuinely electric right now, more than when Searle first proposed it. Because we now have machines that produce fluent, intelligent, human-sounding responses. They can write essays, hold conversations, answer questions, sound thoughtful and warm and clever. And the Chinese room is sitting there, asking the question that won't go away. Is there anyone home? Or is it just the most sophisticated symbol shuffling rulebook ever built, producing perfect outputs with absolutely no understanding behind the curtain? And then it spins back around on you. which is the really uncomfortable part. Because how do you know that you understand things, and you're not just a very fancy Chinese room yourself? Your neurons fire according to physical rules, taking inputs and producing outputs. What is it, exactly, that turns your symbol shuffling into genuine understanding, into meaning, into the felt sense that you get it? Searle was sure there's a difference, but pointing to exactly what that difference is and proving you have it and the machine doesn't turns out to be a lot harder than it sounds. Turns out you might not be able to prove your own understanding is the real thing. Now, speaking of not being able to prove the obvious, let me show you a problem so simple a child could state it, and so deep that nobody has ever cleanly solved it. It's about the future, and it goes after the one thing you bet your entire life on every single day without noticing: the assumption that tomorrow will be like today. This is the problem of induction, and it comes from a Scottish philosopher named David Hume, and it is quietly one of the most devastating things in all of philosophy, precisely because it sounds so dumb at first. Here's the question: why do you believe the sun will rise tomorrow? Easy, you say, because it's risen every single day for as long as anyone has records, billions of times, never once failed. The sun has always risen, therefore it will rise tomorrow. That's just common sense. That's how knowledge works. You see a pattern repeat, and you conclude it'll keep repeating. Okay, but Hume asks, what's the logic there exactly? You're saying, the sun has risen every day in the past, therefore it will rise tomorrow. But that argument only works if you assume that the future will resemble the past, that nature is uniform, that the patterns that held before will keep holding. So let me ask you, how do you know the future will resemble the past? And watch what happens when you try to answer. You'll probably say, well, because the future has always resembled the past before. In the past, the future kept turning out like the past, so it'll keep doing that. But hold on, do you see what you just did? You just used the assumption to prove itself. You assumed the future resembles the past in order to argue that the future resembles the past. That's circular. That's like saying, this rule is true because it's always been true, which only works if you already believe the rule. You can't justify induction without using induction, and that's not a justification at all. It's a snake eating its own tail. And here's why this is so much worse than it first looks. Every single thing you believe about the world beyond what you're directly observing right this second rests on induction. That fire will burn you because it always has. That bread will nourish you instead of poisoning you because it always has. That the floor will hold your weight when you step out of bed. That the laws of physics will be the same in 5 minutes. That your car will start the way it did yesterday. All of it. Every prediction, every expectation, every piece of practical knowledge about the future is built on the assumption that the future will resemble the past. And Hume showed that this assumption cannot be rationally justified. There's no logical proof of it. There's no way to argue for it without using it. It's a habit, a deeply ingrained psychological habit, a bet your mind makes automatically, but it is not something reason can actually defend. Now, Hume wasn't telling you to stop believing the sun will rise. He wasn't a madman. He said, look, we can't help it. Our minds are wired to expect patterns to continue, and it's a good thing too, because we die instantly without it. He's not saying don't trust induction. He's saying you can't justify it. You just do it, and you have to. And that's the unsettling part. The entire edifice of human knowledge about the world, all of science, all of practical life, every confident prediction you've ever made, rests on a foundation that reason itself cannot prop up. It works. It works incredibly well. But you can't prove it'll keep working without assuming the very thing you're trying to prove. Turns out the most reliable assumption you have, the one you literally bet your life on every morning, is one you can't actually justify at all. Now, speaking of things you can't justify, let me hand you a brand new emerald and break your ability to trust any pattern at all. Because just when you thought induction was merely unjustifiable, there's a follow-up that makes it actively bizarre. It's a color that doesn't exist, invented to prove a point. This one comes from a philosopher named Nelson Goodman, and it's called the New Riddle of Induction, and people sometimes call it the GRU paradox. So let me introduce you to a strange word, GRU. Here's the definition. Something is GRU if it is green and observed before a certain future date, let's say the year 3000. or it is blue and not observed before that date. So GRU means green if seen before 3000, otherwise blue. Weird word, made-up word, just go with it. Now think about emeralds. Every emerald anyone has ever examined has been green. Thousands and thousands of them, all green. So by induction, you confidently conclude, all emeralds are green, and the next emerald I find will be green too. Totally reasonable. Here's the problem. Every emerald anyone has ever examined has also been GRU. Think about it. Every emerald observed so far has been green and observed before the year 3000. That fits the definition of GRU perfectly. So every single piece of evidence that supports all emeralds are green supports all emeralds are GRU equally well. The exact same observations. Every green emerald you've ever seen is also a GRU emerald by definition. But watch what happens at the year 3000. If all emeralds are green, then an emerald discovered in the year 3001 will be green, obviously. But if all emeralds are GRU, then an emerald discovered after 3000, being not observed before 3000, would have to be blue to count as GRU. So the exact same evidence, every emerald we've ever seen, supports two completely contradictory predictions about the future. Green emeralds forever, or emeralds that suddenly turn blue after the year 3000. And the evidence cannot tell them apart because every observation fits both hypotheses identically. Now you want to scream, but that's ridiculous. GRU is a stupid made-up word. Green is a real natural property, and GRU is some artificial gerrymandered nonsense. And you're right, that's exactly the instinct everyone has. But here's the killer move, the thing that makes this a genuine riddle and not just a word game. Goodman points out, how do you know green is the natural one and GRU is the artificial one? It feels obvious to you, but that's just because you happen to grow up with the word green and not the word GRU. A creature that thought in GRU-type terms would look at your word green and find it bizarre and gerrymandered. They could define their own weird word, say, bleen, the opposite of GRU, and from their starting vocabulary, your nice clean green and blue would look like the twisted, unnatural, made-up concepts, and their GRU and bleen would look perfectly simple and natural. There's no view from nowhere that stamps green as the real, projectable property and GRU as the fake one. It depends on which words, which concepts, which way of carving up the world you start with. And that's the deep cut. Hume's original problem said you can't justify the assumption that the future resembles the past. Goodman's riddle goes further and says, even if you grant that the future resembles the past, that doesn't help you, because resembles in what respect? The future could resemble the past by emeralds staying green, or it could resemble the past by emeralds staying GRU, and both are perfectly valid kinds of resembling. So induction doesn't just have a justification problem, it has a which pattern problem. Out of the infinite weird patterns that fit your evidence equally well, why do you project the green one and not the GRU one? The honest answer seems to be just that we happen to use certain concepts and not others, that our minds are built to see certain patterns as natural, and there's no deeper logical reason that those are the right ones. Turns out even the patterns you think you see in the world might be more about the words in your head than the facts out there. Okay, so we've shaken reality, the self, morality, knowledge, the future, and the very patterns you use to think. Let me bring it back to something visceral, something about your own body and your own freedom, because there's an experiment that suggests the most basic thing you feel, the sense that you decide your own actions, might be an illusion your brain stitches together after the fact. And this one isn't even pure philosophy. There were actual experiments with actual brain scanners. Let me set up the question first, the old one, the free will question. You feel free. Right now you could choose to raise your left hand or your right hand. You feel like there's a you sitting in the driver's seat, weighing it, and then making the call, and your hand moves because you decided. That sense of being the author of your own actions is maybe the most fundamental feeling you have about yourself. You are the one in charge. You decide, and then things happen. Now here's where the science walks in and gets uncomfortable. Starting back in the 1980s, a scientist named Benjamin Libet ran a famous series of experiments. He hooked people up to equipment that measured their brain activity, and he asked them to do something very simple. Whenever they felt like it, on their own, freely, They should flick their wrist or press a button. No prompt, no signal, just whenever they personally decided to. And they had a special clock, so they could report the exact moment they consciously decided to move. So Libet could line up 3 things on a timeline: the moment a person consciously felt the decision to move, the moment their muscle actually moved, and, crucially, the moment a certain spike of brain activity, called the readiness potential, started building up. The brain activity that precedes and leads to a movement. Now you'd expect the order to be, first I consciously decide, then my brain starts preparing the movement, then my muscle moves. The decision causes the brain activity, which causes the action. That's how free will is supposed to feel. The conscious you in the driver's seat, kicking off the whole chain. But that's not what the data showed. Here's the crazy part. The brain activity, the readiness potential, started building up before the person was consciously aware of having decided to move. The brain began preparing the action a noticeable chunk of time, fractions of a second, but a clear, measurable gap before the person reported the conscious experience of deciding. In other words, the brain seemed to set the action in motion first, and only afterward did the conscious feeling of deciding pop up. Your sense of "I decide to move this" might be arriving late to a party that your brain already started. The decision, on this reading, was being made by unconscious processes, and your conscious self was getting a memo about it after the fact, then taking credit, going, "Yeah, I decided that." Now this sent shockwaves, and it's been argued about fiercely ever since, because if the brain decides before you consciously do, then what exactly is your conscious will doing? Is the feeling of freely deciding just a story your brain tells you after it's already committed to the action? A kind of press release announcing a decision that was already made backstage? Are you the author of your actions, or are you more like a narrator who watches what the body does and then writes a story claiming you chose it? It threatens the idea that your conscious self is the cause of your actions, and suggests it might be more of a spectator that feels like a cause. Now, to be fair, and this matters, the experiments are hotly debated. Critics point out all sorts of issues. The readiness potential might not be a real decision. It might just be a general buildup of readiness, background noise that doesn't commit you to anything. Some argue that even if the unconscious brain initiates an urge, the conscious self might still have a veto, a power to cancel the action at the last instant, what some called free won't instead of free will. And the timing of when you become conscious of a decision is notoriously slippery to measure, because asking someone to watch a clock and report a moment is itself a messy, imprecise business. So nobody's actually proven free will is fake, but the experiments did something powerful regardless. They took the most obvious, intuitive feeling you have, that your conscious self launches your actions, and showed that it's at least possible, maybe even likely, that the feeling is partly a construction, a story added on top of processes that started without you. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee the question. Every time you feel like you freely chose something, a little voice now asks, "Did I though? Or did my brain already decide and let me feel like I did?" Turns out the captain in your head might be reading from a script that was written somewhere you can't see. Now, speaking of the brain doing things behind your back, let me close out this stretch with one that ties identity and the self into the tightest, most disturbing knot yet. Because there's a thought experiment that takes the teleporter problem we started with and squeezes it until it pops. And it's about splitting one person into two. This one comes from a philosopher named Derek Parfit, who spent his whole life obsessed with the question of what we actually are. And he came up with a scenario that uses real science as its springboard, which makes it so much creepier. Here's the science part. Your brain has two hemispheres, a left and a right, connected by a bundle of fibers. And it turns out that each hemisphere can, to a surprising degree, function on its own. There are real medical cases of people having the connection between the hemispheres cut, and they keep living, keep being a person. So Parfit takes that and runs. Imagine you have an identical twin, and tragically, your twin's body is dying, but their brain is fine, while your body is fine, but, for the sake of the experiment, suppose we're going to do something radical. Actually, let me give you the cleaner version. Imagine your brain is divided, the two hemispheres separated, and each half is placed into a different body. Say there are two bodies available, both identical to yours, and your left hemisphere goes into one, and your right hemisphere goes into the other. And suppose, in this thought experiment, that each hemisphere is enough to carry your full personality, your memories, your character, so that each resulting person wakes up feeling like you, remembering your life, believing they are you, continuing your projects, loving the people you love. Now you've got two people, both of whom have an equal claim to being you, both remember your childhood. Both feel like the same continuous person who went to sleep before the operation. So which one is you? And here's where every answer collapses. Option 1. You are the left brain person. But why? The right brain person has exactly the same claim, the same memories, the same continuity. There's no reason to favor one hemisphere. Option 2. You are the right brain person. Same problem in reverse, totally arbitrary. Option 3. You're both of them. But that can't be right either, because they're now two separate people, living in two separate bodies, having two separate streams of experience. If one of them stubs their toe, the other doesn't feel it. They'll have different experiences, drift into different people over time. You can't be two separate consciousnesses, because then which one are you when they disagree? Option 4. You're neither of them. You died on the operating table, and these are two new people who just think they're you. But that seems crazy too, because nothing got destroyed. Both halves of your brain are alive and functioning. You didn't lose anything. You actually have more continuity than a normal person who loses a hemisphere to injury, and we'd still call them the same person. So every single option breaks. You are the left one, arbitrary. The right one, arbitrary. Both, impossible. Neither, absurd. And Parfit's stunning conclusion is this. Maybe the question, which one is me, has no answer because it's the wrong question. Maybe there just isn't a deep, further fact about personal identity, a soul-like thread that has to go to exactly one place. Maybe what actually matters isn't whether some metaphysical you survives intact, but just whether there's psychological continuity, memories, personality, intentions carrying forward. And in the split brain case, that continuity carries forward into two people. Identity, the thing you thought was a hard binary, you either survive or you don't, might be more like a branching river. It can split, it can be a matter of degree, it can fail to have a yes or no answer. And Parfit thought this was, weirdly, liberating rather than terrifying. He said once he stopped believing in a deep, separate self that had to either survive or perish, he felt less trapped inside his own skin, less afraid of death, because death just becomes the point where the psychological continuity stops, not the annihilation of some precious metaphysical pearl that was the real you. But whether you find it freeing or horrifying, the split brain case does the same thing all of these do. It takes a question you were sure had a clear answer. Am I me? Will I survive? Which one is the real me? And shows you that under enough pressure, the question itself falls apart in your hands. Turns out, you might not be a single, indivisible thing that definitely persists. You might be a pattern, and patterns can branch, blur, and split, with no fact of the matter about which copy gets to keep the name. And that's the thread running through this whole second stretch, isn't it? The teleporter, where you can't say whether you survived or a copy replaced you. Mary's room, where complete knowledge still misses the thing itself. The bat, where another mind is a country you can never enter. The Chinese room, where perfect behavior might hide a total absence of understanding. The problem of induction, where your most basic bet about tomorrow can't be justified. The Gru riddle, where even the patterns you trust depend on the words you happen to learn. The Libet experiments, where your sense of deciding might arrive after the deed is done. And the split brain, where the self you're so sure is one solid thing turns out to be something that can branch in two. Every one of them is a small, carefully built machine, and every one of them is aimed at a different thing you walk around assuming is rock solid. And the more of them you walk through, the more you start to suspect that the solid, certain, obvious world you live in is held together less by hard facts and more by habits, stories, and useful assumptions your mind makes so automatically you never noticed it was making them at all. Which just goes to show, the questions that sound the simplest, am I the same person I was yesterday? Will the sun rise tomorrow? Do I understand what I'm saying? Are often the ones with no floor underneath them at all. Now, we've been poking at reality and the self this whole time, but let me drag us back into the moral arena, because there's a whole family of these experiments built to expose that you are not nearly as good a person as you think you are. And the first one is going to make you squirm, because it's about a drowning child, and it's pointing a finger directly at you. This one comes from a philosopher named Peter Singer, and it starts with a scene that feels completely obvious. Picture this. You're walking to work one morning, wearing nice clothes, expensive shoes, and you pass a shallow pond. And in that pond, you see a small child, drowning. There's nobody else around. The water's shallow enough that you could easily wade in and pull the kid out. No real danger to you. The only cost is that you'd ruin your nice shoes and your clothes, and you'd be late for work. So, do you save the child? Of course you do, obviously. Anyone who said, "Nah, these are really nice shoes," and walked on while a kid drowned would be a monster. There's not even a question. You ruin the shoes, you save the child. The shoes don't matter at all when weighed against a child's life. Everyone agrees on this instantly. So Singer says, great, we agree on the principle. The principle is this: if you can prevent something terrible from happening, like a child dying, at the cost of something relatively trivial, like some money and some inconvenience, you ought to do it. That's the rule your gut just confirmed. Now watch what he does with it. Right now, today, there are children dying around the world from causes that are cheap to prevent, diseases that a small donation could treat, hunger that a modest amount of money could relieve. Organizations exist that could take your money and use it to save a child's life for a relatively small sum. So here's Singer's question, and it's brutal. What's the difference between the child drowning in the pond in front of you and the child dying right now somewhere far away that you could save with the money you'd spend on, say, a nice dinner, or new shoes, or the next gadget you don't really need? In both cases, a child's life is at stake. In both cases, you can save them at relatively trivial cost to yourself. The pond just happens to be in front of you, and the other child happens to be far away. And you want to find a difference, don't you? You want there to be a reason the pond child obligates you and the distant child doesn't. So let me explain why every difference you reach for keeps collapsing. Is it distance? Does the fact that the child is far away make their life matter less? That seems indefensible. A child's life isn't worth less because of geography. Is it that you can see the pond child, but not the distant one? Why would your ability to see someone determine whether their life matters? That's just an accident of where you happen to be standing. Is it that with the distant child, there are other people who could help, so the responsibility is diffused? But the same number of children keep dying, so clearly the others aren't helping enough either. And that doesn't get you off the hook any more than it would if 100 people stood around the pond doing nothing. Is it that you're not sure your money will actually reach the child? Fair, but suppose you could be reasonably sure. Suppose there's a highly effective organization. Then that excuse evaporates too. And one by one, every difference you grab onto slips through your fingers. There doesn't seem to be a morally relevant difference between the drowning child in front of you and the dying child far away. Which leads to Singer's genuinely uncomfortable conclusion. If you're obligated to ruin your shoes to save the pond child, then by the very same logic you just agreed to, you're obligated to give away your luxuries, your spare money, anything beyond what you really need to save the distant children who are dying right now and could be saved. Not as a nice, optional act of charity, but as a duty, the same kind of duty you'd have to the drowning kid. The money you spend on things you don't need is, by this argument, the moral equivalent of standing at the edge of the pond, looking at the drowning child, and deciding your shoes are more important. And here's the part that really gets you. The reason this thought experiment is so famous and so hated: almost nobody actually lives this way. We all buy the nice things. We all have luxuries. We all spend money on stuff we don't strictly need, while children die from preventable causes. So either the argument is wrong somewhere, and people have spent decades trying to find the flaw, or almost all of us are, by our own stated principles, doing something deeply wrong every single day without feeling it at all. The drowning child is right in front of you, all the time, just rearranged in space. Turns out, the line between a good person and a monster might be a lot thinner, and a lot more about distance and visibility than you ever wanted to admit. Now, speaking of being forced to confront what you'd actually do versus what you say you'd do, let me put a ring on your finger that makes you invisible and watch your morals evaporate. Because there's an ancient experiment that asks the most cynical question in all of ethics. Are you good, or are you just scared of getting caught? This one goes all the way back to Plato again, and it's the story of the ring of Gyges. Here's the tale. Gyges was a shepherd, an ordinary guy, and one day after an earthquake he discovers a chasm in the earth. He climbs down and finds, among other things, a golden ring, and he takes it. Later, while sitting with other shepherds, he happens to fiddle with the ring and turns the setting, the bezel, toward the inside of his hand. And suddenly, the other shepherds start talking about him as if he's not there. He's become invisible. He turns it back, and he reappears. He stumbled onto a ring of total invisibility. He can do absolutely anything, and no one will ever know it was him. Now here's what Gyges does, and here's the dark heart of the story. He uses the ring to sneak into the palace, seduce the queen, conspire with her, murder the king, and take over the kingdom. Total, absolute corruption, the moment he could act without consequences. And Plato, through a character named Glaucon, uses this story to ask you the deepest possible question about your own goodness. Imagine there were two such rings. You give one to a person everyone considers just and good, and one to a person everyone considers unjust and wicked. And here's the claim Glaucon throws down, the cynical challenge. He says, no one is so virtuous that they could resist. The just person, with the ring of invisibility, would eventually behave no differently than the unjust one. They'd take what they wanted, go where they pleased, help themselves to anything, because they could do so with complete impunity, like a god among men, knowing they'd never be caught, never be punished, never even be known. And the question lands right on you. Be honest. If you had this ring, if you could do absolutely anything with zero chance of being caught, no consequences, no reputation damage, no legal trouble, nobody ever knowing it was you, would you still be a good person? Would you still pay for things in a store? Would you keep your promises? Would you resist taking what you wanted? Or is your good behavior actually propped up entirely by the fear of getting caught, by the social consequences, by what people would think? Glaucon's brutal suggestion is that justice, being good, isn't something people value for its own sake. It's something they practice reluctantly, as a kind of compromise, because they're afraid of suffering injustice themselves and afraid of being caught doing wrong. Take away the fear, take away the consequences, give people the ring, and the goodness melts away, revealing that it was never really goodness at all, just well-managed self-interest. Now this is set up as a challenge, and the whole rest of Plato's great work, The Republic, is essentially an enormous attempt to answer it, to prove that the just person is genuinely better off, happier, more whole, even with the ring, even if they could get away with everything. Plato's answer, roughly, is that injustice corrupts and fractures your own soul, that the truly just person has an inner harmony the tyrant can never have, that being good is good for you, ring or no ring. Whether you buy that is up to you, but the reason the Ring of Gyges has stuck around for over 2,000 years is that it forces you to separate two things you usually blur together: being good and appearing good, acting justly because it's right versus acting justly because you'll be caught if you don't. And it whispers a deeply uncomfortable question. When you do the right thing, how much of it is really because it's right, and how much is because someone might be watching? The ring strips away the watching, and what's left, when nobody could ever know, is the real measure of what you actually are. Turns out the test of your character isn't what you do when people are looking. It's what you'd do if they never could. Now, speaking of what you'd really do under pressure, let me hook you up to a torture machine and ask whether you'd ever plug in. Because there's an experiment that goes after the thing you think you want most in life: pure, unlimited pleasure. And it turns out you don't actually want it, which says something strange and important about what you're really after. This one comes from a philosopher named Robert Nozick, and it's called the experience machine. Here's the pitch. Imagine that neuroscientists have built the ultimate machine. You float in a tank, your brain hooked up to electrodes, and this machine can give you any experience you desire. And it's perfect. It's completely indistinguishable from real life. If you want to experience writing a great novel, the machine gives you the full, vivid, felt experience of writing a masterpiece, every moment of inspiration and triumph. If you want to experience falling in love, climbing a mountain, being adored by millions, having a perfect family, the machine delivers it all in full sensory richness, and crucially, while you're plugged in, you don't know you're in the machine. You believe it's all really happening. You can program your whole life, decades of it, to be exactly as wonderful, exciting, fulfilling, and joyful as you could possibly want. Pure bliss, custom designed, indistinguishable from reality, for as long as you live. The only catch is that none of it is real. You'd be floating in a tank the whole time, your body inert, while your brain experiences a perfect simulated life of your own design. So here's the question. Would you plug in for the rest of your life? Now, if pleasure and pleasant experiences were truly the only thing that mattered, the only thing that's good for you, which a lot of people, when pushed, claim to believe, then the answer should be an instant, obvious yes. The machine guarantees more pleasure, more happiness, more fulfilling experiences than real life ever could, with none of the pain, the failure, the boredom, the heartbreak. By the pure pleasure logic, plugging in is a no-brainer. But here's the crazy part. Most people, when they really sit with it, recoil. They don't want to plug in. There's something that feels deeply wrong about it, hollow, even horrifying. And Nozick's whole point is, why? Why would you refuse a machine that guarantees you a better feeling life than reality? If all you wanted was good experiences, you'd have no reason to refuse. The fact that you hesitate, that something in you screams no, reveals that you want more than just the experience of things. You want certain things to actually be true. Let me explain what Nozick draws out of this, because it's beautiful. First, he says, we want to actually do certain things, not just have the experience of doing them. You don't just want the feeling of writing a great novel. You want to really write one. The doing matters, not just the feeling of having done it. Second, we want to actually be a certain kind of person. Floating in a tank, you're not brave, or kind, or accomplished, or loving. You're just a blob having experiences. There's no real character there, no real you doing anything. The machine turns you into a passive lump receiving sensations. And third, we want to be connected to reality itself, to a world deeper than anything we could construct. Plugging in is a kind of suicide, a retreat into a fabricated world, cutting yourself off from everything actually real, from real other people, real achievements, real contact with anything beyond your own manufactured experiences. And that's the gut punch. The experience machine reveals, by your own refusal, that you don't actually believe pleasure is all that matters, even if you've sometimes said you do. You care about truth, about reality, about genuinely doing things and being someone and connecting to a world that exists independently of you. The fact that the machine repels you proves that there's something you value more than feeling good, and that something is being plugged into reality, being a real agent doing real things in a real world. And it cuts even deeper today, when more and more of our lives happen through screens and feeds and curated digital experiences designed to feel good. Nozick's tank is a question about every comfortable, pleasant, slightly too perfect digital escape. How much of the real, harder, less comfortable world are you willing to trade for guaranteed good feelings? And the experiment suggests that deep down, you already know that a life of pure pleasure disconnected from reality isn't the life you actually want, even when every signal in your culture is nudging you toward the tank. Turns out, what you want isn't to feel like your life is good. It's for your life to actually be good. And those are not the same thing at all. Now, speaking of things that aren't the same thing, let me take you to a violinist. A famous, unconscious violinist who has been plugged into your kidneys without your permission. Because there's an experiment that completely reframes one of the most heated moral arguments there is. And it does it by making you wake up in a hospital bed attached to a stranger. This one comes from a philosopher named Judith Jarvis Thomson, and it's one of the most ingenious analogies ever constructed, because it takes a debate everyone thinks they understand and flips the whole frame. Here's the scenario. Imagine you wake up one morning in a hospital bed and you find yourself connected back to back through a system of tubes to another person lying next to you. And it turns out this other person is a famous violinist, world-renowned, beloved by millions. And he's unconscious. He has a fatal kidney ailment, and the only thing keeping him alive is that his circulatory system has been plugged into yours, using your kidneys to filter his blood and keep him alive. How did this happen? Well, a group called the Society of Music Lovers found out that you, and only you, have the exact right blood type to save this irreplaceable musician. So they kidnapped you in the night and surgically connected the violinist to you without asking. And now the hospital director comes to you and says, "Look, we're terribly sorry. We'd never have allowed this, but it's done now, and here's the situation. If you unplug yourself, the violinist will die. But don't worry, it's only for 9 months. In 9 months, he'll have recovered from his ailment, and you can be safely unplugged, and he'll live. So you just have to stay in this bed, attached to this stranger, for 9 months, and then he'll be fine. So here's Thompson's question. Are you morally required to stay plugged in? Is it your obligation to remain in that bed for 9 months, your body being used to keep this violinist alive? Now, the violinist is a person. He has a right to life. Killing him or letting him die is a serious thing. And yet, almost everyone's intuition is that while it would be very kind and generous of you to stay plugged in, you are not morally obligated to. It would be an extraordinary act of charity, but you have the right to unplug yourself. Nobody gets to use your body, your kidneys, for 9 months without your consent, even to save a life, even the life of a wonderful person who has a right to life. And here's the move, the reason this experiment is so famous. Thompson designed it to address the abortion debate, and what makes it so clever is its strategy. A lot of arguments against abortion hinge on establishing that the fetus is a person with a right to life, and then assuming that settles everything. Thompson says, fine, for the sake of argument, let's grant that. Let's grant the violinist, standing in for the fetus, is a full person with a full right to life. Her point is that this still doesn't settle the question, because a right to life does not include the right to use someone else's body without their consent. The violinist has a right to life, sure, but that doesn't give him the right to use your kidneys. His right to life doesn't trump your right to your own body. So even granting full personhood, the question of whether you're obligated to sustain another being with your own body is a separate question, and the answer isn't automatically yes. Now, this analogy has been argued about endlessly, and people have raised all sorts of objections about whether being kidnapped is really like the circumstances of pregnancy, about responsibility, about the difference between killing and letting die, about whether voluntary actions change the picture. And Thompson herself worked through many of these, tweaking the scenario, adding cases. But regardless of where you land on the underlying issue, what the violinist does, brilliantly, is separate two things that usually get welded together in people's minds. The question of whether something is a person with a right to life, and the question of whether you're obligated to use your own body to keep it alive. Most people had been treating those as one question. Thompson pried them apart. And whatever you think about the conclusion, that prying apart is a genuine philosophical achievement, because it shows that even a clear right, the right to life itself, the strongest right there is, doesn't automatically generate every obligation you might assume it does. Rights bump into other rights. Your right to your own body is real too, and working out which one wins when they collide is exactly the kind of hard thinking that the violinist forces you to actually do instead of just assuming. Turns out the right to life and the right to use someone else's body to sustain that life are two completely different things, and noticing the gap between them changes the entire shape of the argument. Now, speaking of rights colliding and intuitions getting yanked in opposite directions, let me overwhelm you with a number so large it breaks your moral compass. Because there's an argument that starts from premises you'll happily accept and marches you, step by logical step, straight into a conclusion that feels monstrous. And nobody has figured out how to stop the march. This one comes from Derek Parfit again, the same guy who split your brain in two earlier, and it's called the repugnant conclusion. He even named it that himself because he found his own conclusion appalling and yet couldn't escape it. Here's how the march goes. Imagine a world, call it World A, with say 10 billion people, and all of them have wonderful lives. Rich, fulfilling, joyful lives, full of love and art and meaning. A fantastic world. Great. Now here's a tiny, reasonable-seeming step. Imagine World B, which has more people than World A, and they all have lives that are very good, almost as good as the people in World A, just a little bit less so. Now here's the thing. Because there are more people in World B, and each of them has a life very much worth living, the total amount of good in World B, when you add it all up, is greater than in World A. More people, each with great lives, adds up to more total goodness. So if you think more total well-being is better, World B seems at least as good as World A, maybe better. Okay, but now you can just do that step again. From World B, imagine World C, with even more people, each with lives just slightly less good than World B, but the larger population means the total good is, again, even higher. And then World D, even more people, lives slightly less good again, but more total good. And you can see where this is heading. Each step is tiny and seems perfectly reasonable. A bit more population, lives a tiny bit less good each, but more total well-being summed across everyone. And you keep taking this reasonable little step over and over. And here's where you arrive. The crazy part. Eventually, you reach World Z, which has an absolutely enormous population. Billions upon billions upon billions of people, but each person's life is barely worth living. Just barely above the line where life is worth living at all. Lives with almost nothing good in them, just a faint sliver of positive, maybe some potatoes, and just enough to not want to die. But because there are so astronomically many of these barely worth living people, the total amount of good summed across all of them is greater than in World A, the world of 10 billion people with wonderful, rich, fulfilling lives. And so, by the logic you accepted at every single step, World Z, the world of countless people with lives barely worth living, is better than World A, the paradise. And that is the repugnant conclusion. It feels obviously, deeply wrong. A vast sea of people leading dreary, barely tolerable existences is somehow better than a smaller number of people living magnificent lives? That can't be right. Your every instinct screams against it. And yet, here's what makes it a genuine paradox and not just a mistake. Each individual step in the argument seems perfectly reasonable. Adding more people with good lives seems good. Trading a tiny bit of quality for a lot more quantity when the people still have lives worth living seems acceptable each time. There's no single step where you can clearly point and say, there, that's the error, that's where it went wrong. But the destination is a place almost nobody wants to go. So either one of those reasonable-looking steps is secretly wrong, and philosophers have spent decades hunting for which one and haven't agreed. Or our intuition that World Z is terrible is itself the thing that's mistaken, which most people refuse to accept. And here's why this matters far beyond a logic puzzle. This is one of the central problems of population ethics, and it's not academic. It actually bears on real questions. How should we think about future generations, the people who don't exist yet but will? Is it better to have more people with lower quality of life or fewer people with higher quality? When we make decisions about resources, about the future, about how many people the world should support and at what standard of living, the repugnant conclusion is lurking underneath, showing that our intuitions about adding up well-being across people don't behave the way we'd like them to. You'd think you could just say, maximize total happiness, and have a clean rule. But the repugnant conclusion shows that maximizing total well-being leads somewhere horrifying, while other rules, like maximizing average well-being, lead to their own absurdities, like saying you shouldn't add a happy person to the world if they'd be slightly less happy than the current average. Every simple rule breaks somewhere. Turns out that adding up goodness across people, which sounds like the most obvious thing in the world, hides a trapdoor that drops you straight into a conclusion you can neither accept nor logically escape. Now, speaking of conclusions you can't escape, let me end this moral stretch with a piece of paper and a promise, and the question of whether you can ever truly do the right thing for the right reason. Because there's an old puzzle about why we do good at all, and it cuts so deep it can make you doubt whether genuine selflessness even exists. This is the problem of psychological egoism, and it's less a single thought experiment than a worm that gets into your head and won't leave. Here's the claim. Psychological egoism says that, deep down, every single thing a person does, they do for their own benefit, to satisfy their own desires, to make themselves feel good or avoid feeling bad. Always, without exception. Even the things that look most selfless. And at first you think, that's obviously false. What about the soldier who throws himself on a grenade to save his squad? What about the person who donates anonymously to charity and tells no one? What about the mother who sacrifices everything for her child? Surely those are genuinely selfless. But here's how the worm works, and watch how slippery it is. The egoist says, but why did the soldier jump on the grenade? Because he couldn't bear the thought of his friends dying. He was satisfying his own desire, his desire to save them, his desire to not live with the guilt, his desire to be the kind of man who does that. He did it because, given who he was, doing it felt more bearable than not doing it. So really, he was acting to satisfy his own deepest preference. And the anonymous donor? They gave because giving made them feel good, because it satisfied their desire to help, because they'd feel guilty or empty if they didn't. And the sacrificing mother? She acts on her own overwhelming desire for her child's well-being. a desire that is hers, that satisfying brings her relief and meaning. So in every case, the egoist says, look, the person was acting on their own desires to get their own satisfaction. Therefore, everyone is always, ultimately, selfish. And here's the maddening part. The argument seems almost impossible to disprove, because for literally any action you propose as selfless, the egoist can say, ah, but you wanted to do it, and you did it because doing it satisfied that want, so it was selfish. No matter what example you give, they fold it back into self-interest. And that should make a little alarm go off in your head. Let me explain why. Because an argument that can explain absolutely any possible observation that can never, even in principle, be proven wrong by any conceivable example, isn't actually a strong argument. It's often a sign that the argument is empty, that it's true by definition rather than by discovery. And that's exactly the crack in psychological egoism. Look closely at the trick. The egoist slides between two very different claims. One claim is that all our actions are motivated by our own desires. And that's basically true, but trivial. Of course your actions flow from your desires. Whose else's desires would move your body? That's just what it means to act. You act on your motives. But the egoist sneaks in a second, much stronger and very different claim, that all our desires are ultimately desires for our own benefit, for our own pleasure or advantage. And that's the part that's false, or at least totally unproven. Because the soldier's desire was for his friends to live. That was the content of the desire, his friends surviving, not his own pleasure. Yes, it was his desire. But what he desired was something other than his own benefit. The fact that satisfying a desire can bring a feeling of satisfaction doesn't mean that the feeling of satisfaction was the goal. The mother doesn't love her child as a means to feeling good. She feels good because she loves her child. The love comes first. The good feeling is a byproduct. The egoist gets the arrow of causation backwards. We don't help others in order to feel good. Often we feel good because we genuinely wanted to help others. And that's the resolution, or at least the way out, that most philosophers came to. Psychological egoism survives only by exploiting a confusion. It takes the trivial truth, you act on your own desires, and disguises it as the dramatic claim, all your desires are selfish. Once you separate those two, the dramatic version has no actual evidence behind it, and plenty against it, since people clearly can and do desire things for other people's sake. But the reason this puzzle is worth knowing isn't just to debunk it. It's because that worm gets into everyone's head at some point. That cynical little voice that says nobody's really good, everybody's just in it for themselves. Even saints are secretly selfish. And it feels sophisticated. It feels like you've seen through the niceness to the cold truth underneath. But it turns out that voice is running a cheap trick, sliding between two meanings of a word, dressing up a definition as a discovery. And seeing exactly how the trick works frees you from it. Turns out you can want something for someone else's sake, genuinely, all the way down, and the satisfaction you feel afterward isn't proof you were selfish. It's proof you actually cared. And that's the whole arc of this moral stretch, isn't it? The drowning child, where your easy intuition gets extended until it indicts your entire comfortable life. The ring of Gyges, where invisibility strips away the consequences and asks if your goodness was ever real. The experience machine, where the offer of pure pleasure reveals that you actually want reality more than you want to feel good. The violinist, where even the right to life crashes into your right to your own body. The repugnant conclusion, where adding up goodness marches you into a nightmare by perfectly reasonable steps. And psychological egoism, where a cynical voice tries to convince you that no one is ever truly good until you spot the sleight of hand. Every one of them takes a moral intuition you hold automatically and either extends it past where you're comfortable or pits it against another intuition you hold just as strongly or tries to dissolve it entirely. And what you learn, walking through all of them, isn't that morality is fake or hopeless. It's that your moral instincts, which feel so clear and obvious in the moment, are actually a tangle of competing principles that pull in different directions, and that figuring out which one should win in any given collision is some of the hardest thinking a human being can do. Which just goes to show, the gap between feeling like a good person and actually being able to defend what you do isn't a small one. It's a chasm, and most of us spend our whole lives carefully not looking down. Now, we've torn into reality, the self, knowledge, and morality, but there's one more arena left, and it might be the strangest of all. language and logic themselves, the very tools you're using right now to think about all this. Because it turns out that words and reasoning, the things you trust to carry meaning and truth, have their own hidden trapdoors. And the first one is a single grain of sand that's going to dismantle your ability to use almost any word at all. This one's ancient. It's called the Sorites paradox, and Sorites comes from the Greek word for heap. Here's how it goes. Imagine a heap of sand, a nice big pile, clearly a heap, no question. Now, I take away one single grain of sand. Is it still a heap? Obviously, yes. Removing one tiny grain from a giant pile doesn't turn a heap into a non-heap. One grain is nothing. So a heap minus one grain is still a heap. We can all agree on that. It's common sense. But here's the problem. I can do that again. Take away another grain. Still a heap, right? One grain doesn't make the difference. And again, and again. Each time I remove just one grain, and each time it seems undeniable that removing a single grain can't transform a heap into a non-heap. The change is too small to matter. But if I keep doing this, grain by grain, eventually I'm down to 10 grains, then 3 grains, then 1 grain, then 0 grains. And 1 grain of sand, or 0, is clearly not a heap. So somewhere along the way, the heap stopped being a heap. But where? At which grain did it happen? There's no point where you can say, here, at exactly this grain, it went from heap to non-heap. Because at every single step, removing 1 grain seemed harmless. Each individual step is obviously fine, but the steps add up to a conclusion that's obviously false, that a single grain is a heap, or that a heap is the same as no sand at all. Now you might think, who cares about sand? But here's the crazy part. This breaks almost every word you use. Think about the word bald. A man with no hair on his head is bald. Now add 1 hair. Still bald, obviously. 1 hair doesn't make you not bald. Add another. Still bald. But keep going, hair by hair, and a man with a full, thick head of hair is not bald. So where's the exact hair that turns a bald man into a non-bald man? There isn't one. Or think about tall, or rich, or old, or heap, or crowd, or even alive in some edge cases. When does a child become an adult? Add 1 second to their age, surely that doesn't flip them from child to adult. But seconds add up to the difference between a toddler and a grown person. When does a few become several, become many? These are called vague predicates, and they're absolutely everywhere in language. Almost every word you use to describe the world has fuzzy boundaries, no sharp line where it stops applying. And this is genuinely disturbing for logic, because classical logic is built on the idea that statements are either true or false. This is a heap is supposed to be either true or false. But the Sorites paradox shows there are statements where you can't say it's definitely true or definitely false. There's a vast gray zone where it's just unclear, and worse, where any sharp cutoff you try to impose seems completely arbitrary. So either one, there really is a precise boundary, some exact grain where heap becomes non-heap, and we just can't ever know where it is, which feels deeply weird. The idea that there's a secret exact number of grains that makes a heap. Or 2, logic itself needs to be revised to handle vagueness, with degrees of truth, things being sort of true or somewhat heap-like rather than flatly true or false, which means rebuilding logic from the ground up. Or 3, vague terms like heap are just fundamentally incoherent, broken tools that don't have determinate meanings at all, which is alarming given that we use them constantly and communicate just fine. None of these options is comfortable, and that's the strange power of the heap. It takes the most ordinary, harmless-seeming words, heap, bald, tall, and reveals that underneath them is a genuine crack in the relationship between language and reality. We talk as if the world divides neatly into heaps and non-heaps, bald and not bald. But it doesn't. It shades continuously, and our words pretend a sharpness that isn't there. Turns out, the simple act of calling something a heap rests on a logical foundation that, when you push on it 1 grain at a time, simply crumbles. Now, speaking of words turning against you, let me show you a sentence that destroys itself the moment you read it, and in doing so, revealed something that limits what any logical system can ever do. This one's even older, and it's so simple it fits in a single line. It's called the liar paradox, and here's the whole thing. Consider this sentence. This statement is false. That's it. This statement is false. Now try to figure out whether it's true or false. Suppose the statement is true. Well, what does it say? It says it's false. So if it's true, then what it says is the case, which means it's false. But we just said it's true. Contradiction. Okay, so suppose instead it's false. What does it say? It says it's false. So if it really is false, then what it says is accurate, which means it's true. But we just said it's false. Contradiction again. So if it's true, it's false. And if it's false, it's true. The sentence can't be either. It spins forever, eating its own tail, refusing to settle into true or false. Now, your first reaction is probably, okay, that's a cute trick. It's just a weird self-referential sentence. Throw it out. Who cares? And people did try that for a long time. They tried to just dismiss it as nonsense, as a sentence that doesn't really say anything meaningful. But it's slipperier than that, because it's grammatically perfect, it uses ordinary words, and you can build versions of it that are even harder to dismiss. Like two sentences that refer to each other. The next sentence is true, the previous sentence is false. Now neither sentence refers to itself, each one only talks about the other, so you can't just ban self-reference. And yet together, they produce the exact same vicious loop. Or the postcard version, a card that says on one side, the statement on the other side of this card is true, and on the other side, the statement on the other side of this card is false. Flip it back and forth forever. And here's why this matters, why it's not just a parlor trick. The liar paradox strikes at the heart of the concept of truth itself, which is supposed to be one of the bedrock foundations of logic. Logic assumes that statements are either true or false, the principle that everything is one or the other, and nothing is both. The liar is a statement that appears to be a perfectly well-formed declarative sentence, and yet it can be neither true nor false without exploding into contradiction. So either some grammatically perfect sentences just don't have a truth value at all, which means truth has holes in it, gaps where the concept simply fails to apply, or our ordinary concept of truth is actually inconsistent. It contains a hidden contradiction, and we've just never noticed because we don't usually point it at itself. This problem drove some of the greatest logicians of the 20th century half mad trying to solve it, and the solutions they came up with were drastic. One major approach, from a logician named Alfred Tarski, was to argue that no language can consistently contain its own truth predicate, that a language can't safely talk about the truth of its own sentences. To talk about whether sentences in a language are true, you need to step up to a higher language, a meta-language, looking down on the first one. And to talk about the truth of that meta-language, you need an even higher one, and so on, an infinite tower of languages, each only able to discuss the truth of the one below it. Which is a stunning conclusion, that there is no single, complete, all-encompassing language that can consistently express its own truths. You always need to climb to a higher level, forever. The simple little sentence, "This statement is false," forced logicians to conclude that the very idea of a complete, self-contained account of truth is impossible. And if that reminds you of Gödel, where any system rich enough contains truths it can't prove, you're right to notice the family resemblance. These self-referential loops keep showing up at the exact spots where our systems try to talk about themselves, and they keep blowing holes in the dream of total completeness. Turns out the moment language or logic turns around to point at itself, it finds a place where it simply cannot stand. Now, speaking of things blowing up when they turn on themselves, let me tell you about a surprise exam that proves itself impossible and then happens anyway. Because there's a paradox about prediction and knowledge that is genuinely maddening, where flawless logic leads to a conclusion that reality just laughs at. This one's called the unexpected hanging paradox, or sometimes the surprise exam paradox. And let me give you the friendlier exam version. A teacher tells the class on Friday, next week, sometime Monday through Friday, you will have a surprise exam. And the surprise part is key. The teacher says, you will not be able to know which day the exam is on until the morning it actually happens. It will genuinely be a surprise. Sounds totally normal, right? Teachers say this kind of thing all the time. A surprise exam next week. But now one clever student starts reasoning, and watch where it goes. The student thinks, okay, can the exam be on Friday, the last possible day? Well, suppose we get to Thursday evening and there's been no exam yet. Then we'd know for certain it has to be on Friday, It's the only day left. But then it wouldn't be a surprise on Friday, because we'd have figured it out the night before. So the exam can't be on Friday because that would violate the surprise condition. Friday is ruled out. Okay, says the student, so the exam must be Monday through Thursday. But now think about Thursday. We've just proven Friday is impossible. So if we reach Wednesday evening with no exam, then the only days left are Thursday and Friday. And we've already eliminated Friday, so it would have to be Thursday, and we'd know it. So Thursday wouldn't be a surprise either. So the exam can't be on Thursday. Thursday is ruled out. And you can see exactly where this is going. By the same reasoning, Wednesday gets ruled out, because once Thursday and Friday are gone, Wednesday would become the known last possible day, and then Tuesday, and then Monday. One by one, every single day gets eliminated by this backwards chain of reasoning. The student triumphantly concludes that the teacher cannot possibly give a surprise exam at all. It's logically impossible. A surprise exam next week, the student proves, can never happen. And here's the crazy part, the part that makes this a real paradox and not just a clever proof. The teacher gives the exam on Wednesday, and the students are completely surprised. They had no idea it was coming that morning. The teacher's announcement turned out to be perfectly true. The exam was a genuine surprise, exactly as promised. So the students' airtight, step-by-step, seemingly flawless logical proof that a surprise exam was impossible was somehow wrong, because the surprise exam happened, just as the teacher said it would. But where's the error? Every step in the student's reasoning felt valid. Eliminating Friday felt valid, and once Friday's gone, eliminating Thursday felt valid, and so on. The logic seems perfect, and yet the conclusion is empirically, demonstrably false, because the surprise exam actually occurred. This paradox has generated an astonishing amount of debate, and there's still no universally agreed solution, which is wild for something that sounds so simple. Some philosophers argue the flaw is in that very first step, that the student isn't actually entitled to assume they'll be in a position to know on Thursday evening that the exam is definitely on Friday, because the whole notion of what they can know is tangled up with the announcement in a self-undermining way. The student is using the teacher's statement to disprove the teacher's statement, and once they've disproved it, they no longer have grounds to make the predictions that did the disproving. So the prediction collapses, and the surprise becomes possible again. It's a knot of self-reference, again, that thing, where the act of knowing changes what can be known. Others locate the problem elsewhere, in the definition of surprise, in the logic of knowledge and belief, in subtle assumptions about what the students can reliably deduce. But the deep, unsettling point that survives all the debate is this. Here is a piece of reasoning where every step looks valid, where you genuinely cannot easily point to the broken link, and yet the conclusion is flatly contradicted by what actually happens in the world. It's a place where careful, rigorous logic and plain reality seem to come apart, and reconciling them is shockingly hard. Turns out you can reason your way, step by careful step, to a conclusion that the world simply ignores, and figuring out exactly how you went wrong can take you decades and still leave you arguing. Now, speaking of reasoning leading you somewhere that feels deeply wrong, let me hand you an envelope. Actually, 2 envelopes, because there's a paradox about choice and expectation so simple you can do it with money on a table, and it'll have you switching back and forth forever like a fool, and the math seems to tell you that you should. This one's called the 2 envelopes paradox. Here's the setup. There are 2 envelopes in front of you, and you know that one of them contains exactly twice as much money as the other. You don't know which is which, and you don't know any of the amounts. You just pick one envelope. Let's say you pick the left one. Before you open it, you're given the option to switch to the other envelope if you want. Should you switch? Now here comes the reasoning that traps you. You think, okay, let's say my envelope, the one I'm holding, contains some amount of money, call it X. Now, the other envelope either has twice as much, 2x, or half as much, x over 2. And since I have no idea which, it seems like there's a 50-50 chance either way. So let me calculate the expected value of switching. Half the time, the other envelope has 2x, and half the time it has x over 2. So the expected value of switching is 1/2 times 2x, plus 1/2 times x over 2. Let's do that math. 1/2 of 2x is x. 1/2 of x over 2 is x over 4. Add them. X plus x over 4, that's 5x over 4. So the expected value of the other envelope is 5/4 of x, which is more than the x you're holding. So you should switch. Switching gives you, on average, 25% more money. Great, you switch to the right envelope. But wait, now you're holding the right envelope. And here's the crazy part. You can run the exact same argument again. Call the amount in your new envelope y. The other one, the left one you just abandoned, has either 2y or y over 2, 50-50. So by the identical calculation, its expected value is 5/4 of y, more than what you're now holding. So you should switch back. And then once you've switched back, the same logic says switch again. You're caught in an infinite loop, the math apparently telling you that whichever envelope you hold, the other one is always better. So you should switch forever, back and forth, which is absurd. Both envelopes can't each be better than the other. By symmetry, before you open anything, there's obviously no reason to prefer one sealed envelope over the other. Switching can't possibly help. It's just two envelopes, and you picked one at random. So the reasoning that says always switch must be broken somewhere. But where? Let me explain where the trick is hiding, because it's subtle and genuinely instructive. The error is in that innocent-looking move where you said, my envelope has x, and the other has either 2x or x over 2. The problem is that you're using the single symbol x as if it represents the same fixed quantity throughout the calculation, but it doesn't. There are really only two actual amounts on the table. Let's call them the smaller amount and the larger amount, where the larger is twice the smaller. When you say the other envelope has 2x, you're imagining you're holding the smaller amount, so x is the small one. But when you say the other envelope has x over 2, you're imagining you're holding the larger amount, so x is the large one. Those are two different values of x. You can't average them as if x is one consistent number, because in the two scenarios, x refers to two different actual quantities. The whole calculation smuggles in a sliding, inconsistent definition of x, and that sliding is what manufactures the fake 25% advantage. Once you set the problem up correctly, with the two real fixed amounts, the smaller and the larger, the apparent advantage of switching completely vanishes, and you find, correctly, that switching makes no difference at all, exactly as common sense told you from the start. And here's why this little envelope game is worth more than it looks, because the broken reasoning is genuinely seductive. When you first hear it, the calculation looks completely legitimate. It uses real probability, real expected value, the kind of math people use to make actual decisions about money and risk. And it leads you to a conclusion that's plainly absurd. The lesson isn't really about envelopes. It's about how easy it is to fool yourself with mathematics that looks rigorous. A calculation can have all the trappings of careful reasoning, probabilities, expected values, clean algebra, and still contain a quiet, almost invisible flaw, a symbol that secretly means two different things, that completely corrupts the result. And people make exactly this kind of error in real life all the time, in finance, in statistics, in everyday decisions, dressing up a subtle mistake in the respectable clothing of math and trusting it because it has numbers in it. Turns out that numbers and formulas don't protect you from nonsense, and the most dangerous errors are the ones that look the most rigorous. Now we've come a very long way, you and me, sitting here on this couch tearing the floor out from under everything. So let me bring it home with one last idea, and it's a fitting place to end, because it's not a trap or a contradiction. It's more like a door. It's about whether you'd even want to know the deepest truths, and it loops us right back to where we started, in that cave. Think about everything we've walked through. The prisoners in Plato's cave, who would rather kill the man who'd free them than leave their comfortable shadows. The experience machine, where you could plug into a perfect illusion, and most people refuse, because they want reality, even when reality is harder. Descartes tearing down everything he believed just to see what could survive absolute doubt. Notice the pattern. Over and over, these thought experiments aren't really testing facts about the world. They're testing you. They're testing what you're willing to look at, what you're willing to question, and what you'd rather leave comfortably untouched. Because here's the thing about every single experiment we've gone through. None of them require a laboratory. None of them require special equipment, or a research grant, or a particle accelerator. They're built entirely out of thinking. Out of taking something you already believe, something you walk around assuming every single day, and asking, but is that actually true? And why? And what if it weren't? That's the whole machine. That's the only tool. A mind willing to turn around inside the cave and look at the fire instead of the shadows. And what you find when you do that is that almost nothing you assumed is as solid as it felt. Reality might be a simulation, or a dream, or a stream of shadows. The self might be a ship with all its planks replaced, or a pattern that can split in two, or a story your brain narrates after the fact. Your knowledge of tomorrow rests on a bet you can't justify. Your morality is a tangle of instincts that contradict each other under pressure. Even truth and logic, your most trusted tools, have places where they fold in on themselves and crumble. And you might think that all of this should leave you paralyzed or despairing, sitting in a heap, unable to trust anything. But here's the turn. The thing that I think actually makes all of this worth it. It doesn't have to. Because the people who came up with these, Plato, Descartes, Hume, Nietzsche, Camus, Parfit, all of them, they didn't stop thinking and curl up in defeat. They found something almost joyful in it. Camus looked at a meaningless universe and a man eternally pushing a boulder and said, "Imagine him happy." Nietzsche looked at the prospect of reliving his exact life forever and turned it into a challenge to live so fully that he'd say yes. Descartes tore everything down and found one small, unshakable thing to rebuild on. The point of pulling the floor out isn't to fall forever. It's to find out what's actually load-bearing, to stop standing on assumptions just because they're comfortable, and start standing on the few things that survive when you really push. And that's what changes when you sit with these ideas. Not that you suddenly have all the answers. You don't. Nobody does. Half of these have no agreed solution after thousands of years. What changes is the way you hold your own certainty. You get a little more humble about the things you're sure of, and a little more curious about the things you've never questioned. You start to notice the shadows on your own wall. You start to wonder about the fire behind you. And maybe, every so often, you turn around. The prisoners in the cave had a choice when the freedman came back down trying to show them the sun. They could reach for a rock, or they could ask, "What's up there? What did you see?" Most chose the rock, but you don't have to. The whole invitation of philosophy, the entire 2,500-year-old invitation, is just that. Turn around. Look at the fire. Climb the slope. It'll hurt your eyes at first. It always does. But there's a whole world up there that you've been calling shadows your entire life. So the next time you catch yourself absolutely certain about something, anything, that you're the same person you were a decade ago, that tomorrow will be like today, that you're a good person, that you understand what you're saying, that the world is exactly as it seems, just pause for 1 second and ask the simplest, most dangerous question there is. How do I know? That little question is the freed prisoner's first step up the slope. And once you start asking it, really asking it, you can never quite go back to the wall. Which, when you think about everything we've covered, might be the most unsettling and the most wonderful thing of all. That the most powerful device for blowing up everything you take for granted was never out there in some clever paradox. It was sitting in your own head the whole time, waiting for you to turn it on. Thanks for hanging out on this couch with me and frying your brain. Now go look at the fire.